The night was thick with the scent of dust and ancient knowledge, the Hidden Leaf Village's library quiet except for the faint rustle of paper. Naruto Uzumaki, on the edge of becoming a genin, had slipped away from the prying eyes of the village. Clutching the forbidden scroll, an object no one in Konoha was ever meant to touch, he moved like a shadow through the library's halls. With his mischievous grin, he thought of the praises he'd received from his classmates when he learned the shadow clone jutsu. It was the perfect way to prove his worth after years of being ignored and ridiculed. But as he fumbled with the scroll, his fingers brushed against an unfamiliar symbol, one that pulsed with dark, otherworldly energy. It seemed ancient, far beyond the reach of anything even the Hokage had ever mentioned. Intrigued, Naruto couldn't resist. He began to unravel the scroll, deciphering the instructions with the same determination he applied to everything else. But as he spoke the incantations aloud, the seal within the scroll responded in a violent, blinding burst of energy. The seal ripped open like a wound in the fabric of reality, and Naruto felt a presence surge within him. Power, no, something far beyond power was embedding itself into his very being. The world seemed to stretch, twist, and warp around him, and for a moment, Naruto could see entire dimensions, parallel worlds colliding like planets in a violent cosmic dance. What's happening to me? Naruto gasped, clutching his chest as a strange sensation burned through his veins. The words of the scroll seemed to echo in his mind, spoken not in language but in pure instinct. This power is not of this world. You are the chosen vessel, Naruto Uzumaki, bearer of the cosmic forces of Blast. His eyes shone, glowing with an energy that was incomprehensible. There was no turning back now. The transformation was complete. The seal had merged his chakra with something infinitely greater, something that existed beyond the stars, beyond time and space. The power of Blast, the cosmic warrior, now coursed through him. First display of power. Mizuki, the traitor of Konoha, knew his plan was nearing its end. He had convinced Naruto to steal the forbidden scroll, making the young ninja an easy scapegoat for his own ambitions. Mizuki's laughter echoed through the trees as he stood in front of Naruto, who was gasping in confusion and shock, the scroll still clutched tightly in his arms. Foolish brat, Mizuki sneered. Did you really think you could learn forbidden jutsu and not face the consequences? Naruto stood frozen, his mind racing. A sense of foreboding gnawed at him, but he couldn't fathom what was happening. Mizuki raised his kunai, aiming it directly at Naruto's heart. You think you're some sort of genius? The Hokage can't protect you now. Mizuki sneered, rushing forward to strike. In the split second that followed, something inside Naruto snapped. His mind flooded with cosmic energy, a sudden surge of primal instinct as the foreign power he had just unlocked became his own. Before Mizuki could even land a blow, Naruto's hand instinctively shot out. A portal dark and deep like a tear in the fabric of reality opened in front of him, its edges crackling with immense energy. Mizuki's attack collided with the portal and, as though caught in the pull of a massive gravitational force, the kunai was sent spiraling through space, redirected with impossible precision. In the blink of an eye, it pierced Mizuki's chest, sending him crashing to the ground in a heap of lifeless flesh. Naruto stood, stunned, his heart racing. He didn't even know what he had done. His body trembled as he looked down at the motionless form of Mizuki. Blood seeped into the dirt, and the traitor's eyes remained wide open in shock, his last moments frozen in fear. Irika, who had followed Naruto out of concern, arrived at the scene just in time to witness the aftermath. His eyes darted between Naruto and the corpse, the air thick with confusion and a growing sense of dread. What did you do, Naruto? Irika whispered, his voice a mix of disbelief and awe. Naruto looked at him, his pupils still glowing with an ethereal light, as though he were no longer fully himself. I didn't mean to. I just didn't want to die. Irika took a step back, unable to mask the fear now welling up inside him. The power radiating from Naruto was overwhelming, and he could feel it in the very air around him. It was as if the boy had tapped into a force far greater than the village, greater than the world itself. That power. It's not natural, Iruka muttered, unable to tear his eyes away from Naruto. Naruto's breath was heavy, his mind swirling with a mix of exhilaration and confusion. This power, whatever it was now part of him. It was more than just chakra, more than anything he had ever felt. It was as though the very fabric of existence was at his fingertips. Iruka's voice broke through his trance. Naruto, we need to get you to the Hokage. This isn't something we can ignore. But Naruto didn't respond. He was too consumed by the raw power coursing through him. For the first time in his life, he felt truly unstoppable, like the world itself was beneath him. In the silence that followed, Iruka couldn't shake the growing realization. He wasn't just witnessing the rise of a new power, he was seeing the birth of something that could change everything. And deep down, he couldn't help but wonder, was this power a blessing? Or a curse? Naruto awoke early the next morning, his head still spinning from the events of the night before. The power was still there, a heavy, unyielding presence that hummed beneath his skin like a living thing. He could feel it every moment, each breath, each movement. It was as if the universe itself had become part of him. Yet, despite the overwhelming surge of power, there was something unsettling about it. Something dark. With the scroll still clutched in his hand, he decided to experiment. What else could he do with this newfound ability? What limits did it have? The possibilities seemed endless, and the weight of them settled on his shoulders like an invisible burden. As the sun rose over Konoha, Naruto stood in an open field, alone, determined to understand his power. First, he focused on the portals. His mind willed the fabric of space to twist, and a tear appeared before him, shimmering with energy. It was a swirling vortex of black and purple light, pulsating like the heartbeat of a dying star. Naruto stepped forward, hesitating for just a moment before he plunged his hand into the portal. The world around him warped, bending, and stretching as though he were falling into another reality. His senses overloaded with the disorienting feeling of being both everywhere and nowhere at once. His feet hit the ground, and he realized he was no longer in the field. He was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring out into a vast, infinite abyss, stars twinkling like distant pinpricks of light. Naruto's heart raced. The portal had transported him, but where? He didn't know. A sudden jolt brought him back to the present. The vortex snapped shut with a deafening crack. He was back in the field. Okay, he muttered to himself, breathless. This is insane. His mind raced as he realized the potential of this ability. I can go anywhere. I can be anywhere. The thought was intoxicating. But that wasn't all. He could feel the gravity around him, bending in strange, unnatural ways. He concentrated, and suddenly, the very ground beneath his feet seemed to lighten, as if the laws of physics were no longer relevant. With the thought, he sent himself into the air, floating effortlessly. Whoa, Naruto exclaimed as he hovered just above the ground. I can fly. But that wasn't all. He felt the energy around him, surging in the air, crackling at the edges of his senses. With a flick of his hand, a pulse of pure energy shot out, ripping a large boulder in half. He stared at the debris, wide-eyed. He had done that. I can manipulate gravity, energy, space. For a moment, a sense of invincibility washed over him. There was nothing that could stop him now. But just as quickly, doubt crept into his mind. What would this power mean for him? What was the price? Naruto spent the next few weeks training in secret. He didn't tell anyone about his newfound abilities. Not even Iruka, though he could feel the eyes of the village upon him. His training was intense, driven by both the need to understand his powers and the fear that he might lose control. Each day, he tested a different aspect of his abilities. The portals were the first thing he mastered, opening them with ease and traveling through them to distant locations. He soon discovered he could not only travel through space but also time, though he couldn't yet control it fully. At first, it was disorienting, arriving in places he didn't recognize, moments he didn't understand. But as he practiced, he learned to guide the portals to specific places, even using them in combat, allowing him to redirect attacks and appear behind enemies in the blink of an eye. The next power he explored was gravity manipulation. At first, he simply lifted objects, small rocks and then larger ones, but soon, he found himself altering the very gravity of his surroundings. He could increase the gravity in a specific area, making it nearly impossible for anything to move. Conversely, he could reduce the gravity, allowing him to float or send objects hurtling into the sky. The energy manipulation was more difficult to master. Naruto had no formal training in ninjutsu, and he knew that chakra and this cosmic energy weren't the same. But with time, he learned to create blasts of energy powerful enough to destroy entire trees, launching them from his hands like missiles. His control over the energy was still rough, but the potential was clear. He could wield it with devastating force. But the most astonishing power, one that he barely understood, was the speed. One day, in a moment of frustration, he had pushed himself to the limit, channeling all his energy into his legs. The result was beyond anything he could have anticipated. The world around him slowed to a crawl, and Naruto moved with such speed that it was as if he were skipping across time itself. In an instant, he was across the field, then back, then across again. He could move faster than any eye could follow, faster than any ninja, even faster than light. But as he reached the limits of his speed, something unexpected happened. The world around him seemed to stretch and distort, as though the fabric of reality couldn't keep up. He had pushed too far, too fast, and with a sharp pain in his chest, he collapsed to the ground, the energy draining from him. It was a reminder that even with these powers, he had limitations, ones that he still didn't fully understand. Despite his newfound strength, Naruto's life in Konoha didn't change in the ways he had hoped. The villagers, who had once feared him as the vessel of the Nine Tails, still saw him as a pariah. His growing abilities only intensified their hatred and mistrust. One afternoon, Naruto was walking through the village, heading to Ichiraku Ramen to grab a meal, when a group of villagers spotted him. The usual murmurs of disdain followed him, but today, the whispers carried a darker edge. One old man spat on the ground as Naruto passed by. "You think just because you're stronger, you're special?" he sneered. "You're still that demon's vessel." Naruto froze, his fists clenching at his sides. He wanted to shout, to scream, but he knew better. His anger had a dangerous way of manifesting, especially with the cosmic power now coursing through him. But it wasn't the old man's words that cut deep, it was the hatred in their eyes. The disgust. The rejection. "No matter what I do, no matter how strong I get, they'll never see me as anything but the demon." He walked faster, his head low, but the words of the villagers followed him. Some called him a monster. Others accused him of using the Nine Tails power to become a weapon. None of them understood. None of them even cared. Even Irika, who had once shown him kindness, began to pull away. Naruto had caught him talking to the Hokage one night, his voice low and worried. "Are you sure it's safe to let him keep those powers?" Irika had asked, concern heavy in his tone. "What if they change him? What if he's not our Naruto anymore?" Naruto's heart sank as he overheard this conversation. His mentor, his only friend, was starting to fear him. The power inside him was uncontrollable, like a storm brewing beneath the surface. But the fear wasn't from the villagers alone, it was from the people he had once trusted. Days passed, and Naruto found himself slipping deeper into isolation. He no longer visited the Hokage's office or spent time with Irika. His days were spent in the forests outside the village, honing his skills, pushing the limits of his abilities. He knew that if he stayed in Konoha, the tension would only grow. He had already seen the seeds of distrust being sown. He began to question what it all meant. What was the point of this power if he was still seen as the demon, the outcast? Why should he protect a village that would never accept him? Why should he stay in a place where everyone feared him? One night, as he sat atop a hill overlooking the village, the wind blowing through his hair, Naruto made a decision. Maybe it's time I stop trying to fit in. If they want to fear me, let them. I don't need their approval. And with that thought, the seed of rebellion was planted deep within him. If Konoha would not accept him, then perhaps it was time to carve his own path. The journey ahead would be long, filled with dangers and challenges, but for the first time, Naruto didn't feel afraid. He had the power of a god. And no one would stop him. It was a mission like any other, simple, routine. Team 7, led by Kakashi, was dispatched to a small village on the outskirts of the Land of Fire. The objective was straightforward: escort a group of villagers who had been under threat from a group of rogue ninjas. With Sakura and Sasuke by his side, Naruto had no reason to expect anything unusual. But as the mission progressed, something felt off. The rogue ninjas they were supposed to confront weren't just a handful of disorganized bandits. They were highly trained, and they had a plan. By the time Team 7 reached the village, it was already under attack. Kakashi had quickly assessed the situation and given orders, directing the team to split up and protect the villagers while he dealt with the main force. However, Naruto had never been one to follow orders, especially when he felt the power within him rising like a tidal wave. His sense of urgency and arrogance pushed him to act faster than anyone else. He could end this, quickly, before anyone else got hurt. In a split second, he raised his hand, calling on the energy coursing through his body. A vortex of black and purple light exploded from his palm, tearing through the air. The rogue ninjas, who had been hiding in the shadows, were caught in the blast, their bodies flung into the air like ragdolls. They were obliterated, there remains nothing more than charred fragments of flesh and bone. But as the dust settled, Naruto's heart skipped a beat. The villagers who had been caught in the blast radius were sprawled across the ground, their bodies lifeless or mangled. Some of them had been too close to the explosion to escape its destructive force. No! Naruto shouted, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't meant for this to happen. The rogue ninjas were gone, but the cost was unimaginable. Sakura screamed in horror as she saw the aftermath. She rushed to help the injured villagers, but it was too late for many of them. Kakashi, who had been finishing off the last of the enemy forces, arrived at the scene, his face grim. "Naruto, what did you do?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost accusing. I didn't mean for it to happen," Naruto stammered, guilt flooding his chest. His hands trembled as he looked at the destruction he had caused. I just wanted to protect them." But it was too late for apologies. The villagers, who had been saved from the rogue ninjas, now viewed him with fear and hatred. Their lives had been shattered by his power. Naruto had become the very thing they had always feared. Sasuke, standing to the side, said nothing. His expression was unreadable, but the coldness in his eyes spoke volumes. Kakashi's disappointment was palpable. "Naruto," he said, his tone heavy with the weight of the situation, "you need to learn to control that power. You can't afford to be reckless." But the words didn't reach Naruto. They bounced off him like water off a stone, leaving him feeling more alienated than ever. His instincts, his power, it was all too much. But it was the only thing he had. The only thing that could make him strong. The only thing that could protect him. The mission had ended, but the consequences lingered. Konoha's leadership was quick to respond, and as expected, they weren't pleased. The Hokage called for a meeting to address the incident, and Team 7 was summoned to the Hokage's office to explain what had happened. Naruto's heart raced as he stood before the Hokage, his gaze flickering between the older man and the members of his team. Iruka was there too, his usual warmth replaced by a heavy silence. The village had lost lives, and though many of them were enemy ninjas, the deaths of innocent civilians weighed heavily on the village's collective conscience. "Do you have anything to say, Naruto?" Tsunade asked, her voice calm but stern. The weight of her gaze felt like an anchor pulling him down. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Naruto said, his voice strained. He wasn't even sure if he believed it himself. I wanted to protect them. I thought I could end it fast, but You didn't control your power," Tsunade interjected, her voice sharp. "You unleashed it without thinking. What do you think would have happened if someone from the village had been caught in that blast? This isn't the first time your recklessness has put the village at risk, Naruto." Naruto flinched, the words cutting deeper than he could have expected. He wanted to argue, to explain that it wasn't his fault, that he was only trying to protect them, but the guilt he felt was too overwhelming. He couldn't even meet her eyes. "We've been talking," Iruka said softly, though there was a hint of sadness in his tone. "And the village is concerned. We all are." "What do you mean?" Naruto asked, his heart sinking. "It's clear you've been struggling with your power," Tsunade continued. "We're going to have to take steps to ensure that this doesn't happen again." Naruto's chest tightened. "Struggling with my power? That wasn't the problem. The problem was the way they saw him, the way they always saw him, as a weapon. As something dangerous. A ticking time bomb waiting to explode." Sakura and Sasuke both avoided looking at him, their faces a mixture of guilt and fear. It was as if they were afraid that even being near him might trigger something else. Sasuke, always the stoic one, had little to say, but Naruto knew the truth. He was different now, too different to fit in with the rest of them. "We're going to assign a special team to monitor you," Tsunade said, breaking the silence. "Until we can be sure that you won't cause any more harm." Naruto's blood ran cold. Monitor me? He was no longer trusted. They saw him as a danger, as something they couldn't control. "Until then, you'll remain under special supervision," Tsunade added. "I think it's for the best, Naruto." A cold, bitter laugh bubbled up from deep within Naruto. For the best. The words echoed in his mind like a cruel joke. The meeting ended, but the damage had already been done. The weight of the words still hung in the air as Naruto walked away from the Hokage's office. His chest ached with the realization that no matter how hard he tried, he could never escape the stigma of the Nine Tails. No matter how much power he had, he would always be the monster. Iruka had tried to console him later, but his words fell on deaf ears. "He's just trying to protect me," Naruto thought bitterly, but it only made the ache worse. Everyone was trying to protect him from himself, from his power. But what did they know about him? What did they know about his pain? The village, his so-called family, still saw him as an outcast. They wanted to control him, monitor him, as if he were nothing more than a ticking bomb. Every time they looked at him, they saw the demon inside him. They didn't see the boy he had become. The boy who had fought to survive, to grow stronger. "I don't need them," Naruto muttered to himself as he stood on the rooftop overlooking the village. His eyes burned with resentment. "I'll show them. I'll show them all." He had always dreamed of being a hero, of being accepted. But now, it seemed like his only choice was to prove his superiority, to carve his own path. If Konoha wanted to fear him, then fine. He would give them something to fear. With a determined look on his face, Naruto turned away from the village, his heart hardening. His path was clear. and nothing, not even the village that had once been his home, would stand in his way. Naruto's decision to leave Konoha had been brewing for weeks, perhaps even months. He had grown tired of the village's fear, their constant treatment of him as a weapon. They could never see him as anything other than the vessel of the Nine Tails, a cursed child with unimaginable power. The latest incident, the mission where his power had unintentionally killed civilians, was the final straw. Naruto had become a living weapon in their eyes, and the elders, led by Danzo, had made it clear that they intended to control him. Their attempts to confine him, to monitor him like a lab experiment, only deepened the rift between him and the village. It all came to a head when the village elders called for another meeting, one that Naruto had no intention of attending. Word had spread quickly that Danzo was pushing for Naruto to be locked away, his powers sealed, to prevent him from becoming a threat to Konoha's stability. But Naruto wasn't just going to sit there and accept their judgment. He wasn't their puppet. The Hokage's office was tense when Naruto stormed in, his eyes ablaze with defiance. Tsunade sat at her desk, her expression weary, as if she had been expecting this. The elders Homura, Koharu, and Danzo were already seated, their eyes cold and calculating. "Sit down, Naruto," Tsunade said, her voice firm but not unkind. She wasn't his enemy. She had tried to protect him, but there was only so much she could do. "I'm done sitting," Naruto snapped, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. His gaze swept over the elders, settling on Danzo. "I'm not your prisoner. I'm not your weapon." Danzo's eye narrowed beneath his bandaged face, his voice low and cold. "You're a threat, Naruto. We gave you a chance, but your power is too dangerous to leave unchecked. You will submit to our control, or we will take more drastic measures." Naruto's anger flared. His power pulsed around him, swirling like a storm waiting to be unleashed. He had already had enough of being controlled, enough of being treated like a tool. He wasn't just going to roll over and take this. He was stronger than they could ever imagine, and they had no idea what he was capable of. "I won't be your puppet," Naruto spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you can control me? You think you can keep me in this cage? I'm done. I don't belong here." "Enough of this, Naruto," Koharu said sharply, her voice cutting through the tension. "You don't understand the consequences of your actions. You will stay, or we will do what we must." Naruto's heart pounded in his chest, the fury boiling inside him. He wasn't a child anymore. He had the power to take control of his own destiny. And the village, the people who had once been his family, had only ever seen him as a burden, a weapon. Before anyone could react, Naruto slammed his hand onto the floor, creating a powerful ripple of energy that shook the room. A portal black and purple, crackling with cosmic energy, appeared in front of him, the swirling vortex swirling ominously. "I'm leaving," Naruto declared, his voice cold and resolute. "You can't control me anymore." In an instant, he stepped into the portal, and the room was left in stunned silence. The elders' eyes widened as the space where Naruto had stood was now empty, the portal closing with a deafening snap. Escape into the unknown. Naruto's heart raced as he stepped through the dimensional portal, feeling the familiar pull of the cosmic energy coursing through his veins. The portal closed behind him with a faint crackle, leaving him standing in an unfamiliar landscape. He had left Konoha far behind. The village, the people who had once treated him like a pariah, were now a distant memory. But there was no relief. No satisfaction in his escape. He had to keep moving, keep growing stronger, until he was untouchable. Until the whole world understood what he was capable of. The landscape before him was barren, a vast stretch of rocky terrain and swirling winds. The air felt different here, thicker, heavier with an unknown energy. Naruto felt a surge of power, a wave of cosmic energy that seemed to resonate with his own. It was as if the very world around him was reacting to his presence. "I'll get stronger," Naruto muttered to himself, his fists clenched. I'll make them all see. Konoha will regret ever thinking they could control me. He didn't know where to go next, but he knew one thing for sure, he wouldn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not now. Building strength in secret, training in isolation. Over the following months, Naruto wandered through various dimensions, each one more bizarre and dangerous than the last. The power he had unlocked was beyond anything the villagers could understand, let alone control. He experimented with his abilities, pushing himself to the limits. He opened portals to distant lands, sought out ancient knowledge hidden in forgotten realms, and faced countless challenges that honed his skills. Through his travels, he discovered new facets of his cosmic power. He could manipulate gravity at will, bending the very laws of nature to his will. He learned to move at near light speed, his body an unstoppable force as he tore through dimensions. His energy manipulation abilities became more refined, allowing him to create devastating blasts of energy that could level entire mountains. But with each new power he discovered, Naruto also grew more isolated. His encounters with other beings, whether they were ancient gods, demonic entities, or wandering warriors, only reinforced his growing sense of superiority. They couldn't match him. They couldn't challenge him. And yet, in the silence of his isolation, a part of him began to wonder, what was the point of all this power? He had left Konoha to escape their control, but was he now any different from the very thing he had resented? He had become the thing he feared most, a force that no one could stop, a god walking among mortals. But those moments of doubt were fleeting. His anger, his need for vengeance, always overpowered them. He would continue to grow stronger, to prove to the world and to Konoha that they had made a mistake. He was no longer their weapon. He was a god in his own right. As the months passed, Naruto's power became nearly limitless. His cosmic energy intertwined with his chakra, creating an unstoppable force within him. He could open portals at will, bending the fabric of space and time to his will. He could move between dimensions, leaving no trace of his presence. He had become untouchable. But it wasn't enough. He needed more. More power, more strength, more dominion. Until nothing in the world could challenge him. Until Konoha had no choice but to kneel before him. Until the entire shinobi world knew his name and feared it. After months of training, Naruto knew that it was time to take the next step. He couldn't hide in the shadows forever. He had spent enough time in isolation, cultivating his power. It was time to return to the world that had cast him aside, the world that had once tried to control him. The image of Konoha burned in his mind, his former home, the village that had rejected him, that had seen him as a monster. It was time to make them regret it. He opened another portal, the swirling energy ripping through the fabric of space. This time, it wasn't a random dimension. It was Konoha. He could feel it, the pull of the village, the memories, the pain, the anger. It was time to show them who he had become. As he stepped through the portal, a smirk crept across his face. This time, he would return as a god. As the months passed, Naruto's power grew beyond anything he could have imagined. What had once been a chaotic surge of cosmic energy now flowed within him like an unstoppable tide, perfectly synchronized with his chakra. No longer just a force of destruction, he had come to understand his abilities with chilling clarity. The portals, his primary means of traversing dimensions, were now an extension of himself. With a mere thought, he could bend space to his will, creating gateways that connected him to countless worlds. But it wasn't just the portals that made him nearly invincible. He had learned to manipulate reality itself, to distort the laws of physics and the very fabric of existence. Gravity, a force that had once been a natural constant, now bent to his command. With a wave of his hand, he could create gravity wells that crushed entire armies beneath their weight, reducing their strength to nothing more than dust. He could amplify or nullify the force of his attacks with perfect precision, turning the tide of battle in an instant. But the true scope of his power became clear when he realized that he could alter the very essence of reality within the confines of his portals. Through his manipulation of space and time, he could erase, rewrite, or create entire landscapes. He could undo an action, revive the dead, or bring the suffering of others to a halt. His power was not just physical, it was conceptual. Naruto's once insatiable desire for recognition had morphed into something far darker, a desire to control. To reshape the world in his image, to force others to bow to his will. His mind, once full of youthful ambition and dreams of becoming Hokage, was now consumed with thoughts of conquest. He no longer needed the approval of Konoha or the world at large. He had surpassed them all. He was beyond mere mortal understanding. He was a god among men. But with this newfound clarity came a chilling realization: power alone was not enough. He needed to solidify his rule, to establish an army that would serve his every whim. A god needed followers, fearful, loyal followers. It was time to make a statement. Naruto opened a portal, the dark swirl of cosmic energy stretching open like a rift in the fabric of reality itself. He stepped through, leaving the barren wastelands he had been training in for the better part of a year. This time, his destination was the Land of Waves. The Land of Waves had always held a special place in Naruto's heart, at least it had when he was younger. It was the place where he had first learned what it meant to fight for something greater than himself. It was where he had faced the likes of Zabuza and Haku, and where he had made a name for himself as a ninja. But that was before. Now, Naruto's eyes saw the world through a different lens, one of power and control. The Land of Waves had once been a beacon of hope for the oppressed, and Naruto had come to extinguish that light, not with kindness or liberation, but with absolute dominance. The streets of the Land of Waves were quieter than they had been when he was last here. Gado's reign of terror had taken a toll on the people. Poverty and fear gripped the land. Gado, the once wealthy shipping magnate, had turned the nation into his personal fiefdom, crushing the people under his boot. When Naruto arrived, the people were gathered near the docks, visibly defeated. A group of Gado's henchmen patrolled the area, mocking the citizens and throwing scraps of food to the hungry. The sight was pitiful, but Naruto felt no sympathy. His eyes were cold as he surveyed the scene, taking in the chaos that Gado had wrought. This was an opportunity, a chance to prove his power, to show the world what it meant to cross him. He stepped forward, and in the blink of an eye, he opened a portal beneath the ground, the swirling abyss beneath his feet growing wider and deeper. The soldiers nearest to him were the first to notice, but by the time they could react, Naruto had already manipulated gravity, sending them crashing to the ground under an immense weight. A single thought, a flick of his wrist, and the land shook. Gravity intensified around Gado's forces, crushing them into the earth, their bodies snapping under the pressure. But Naruto didn't stop there. He created a rift in reality itself, sending the dead soldiers through the portal to another dimension, an endless void where they would never return. The remaining soldiers scattered in terror, but they were no match for Naruto's newfound abilities. He manipulated the gravity again, pulling them to the ground, their movements sluggish and heavy, before pulling them into the air and suspending them in a crushing field of energy. He made sure to leave them alive, just barely paralyzed by his power. The people of the Land of Waves watched in stunned silence as Naruto stood in the middle of the carnage, his aura pulsating with power. He raised a hand, and the gravity field lifted, releasing the soldiers. They crumpled to the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies broken and their wills shattered. Gado's men are weak, Naruto declared, his voice booming across the land. But they will serve me now. The fear in the soldiers' eyes was palpable. They knew better than to resist. They had seen what he was capable of. They had witnessed his absolute dominance over their comrades, and they had no choice but to bow before him. Naruto opened another portal, this time to the darkest corners of the world, where the most desperate and broken of men existed. He pulled Gado's men through it, transmuting them into his first soldiers, mindless puppets bound to his will. They were no longer Gado's henchmen. They were Naruto's. "You will serve me," he told them, his voice cold and commanding. "From now on, you will fight for the weak, but you will rule them with fear." As the men stood, their eyes glazed and lifeless, Naruto smiled a twisted, dark smile. He wasn't liberating them. He was enslaving them. He wasn't offering them salvation, he was offering them power, at the cost of their free will. He would be their protector, their god. But his protection would come at the price of their subjugation. From this moment on, the land of waves would be under his rule. With his newfound army, Naruto began to expand his influence. He used his portals to gather followers, pulling in those from other lands who had lost everything. He preyed upon the vulnerable, the weak, the broken. He offered them power, his power in exchange for their loyalty. They would be his tools, his soldiers, his pawns in the grand game he was beginning to play. Naruto's reputation spread quickly. Those who had heard of the legendary ninja from Konoha now spoke of a new force that was rising, an unstoppable god who ruled with fear and demanded absolute obedience. His name struck terror in the hearts of many. As his army grew, so did his desire for more. He knew that the land of waves was just the beginning. There were other lands, other villages that had fallen into corruption or decay. He would conquer them all. And when the world was his, when every nation bowed to his will, he would reshape it in his own image. But even as he built his army and claimed victory after victory, a part of him could not forget Konoha, the village that had once rejected him, that had seen him as nothing more than a weapon to be used. He would make them regret it. The night was unusually still. It was as if the very world held its breath in anticipation of the storm that was about to come. Naruto stood at the edge of a forest, looking at the village that had once been his home, Konoha. The village of his birth, the village that had cast him aside and branded him a demon, had treated him as nothing more than a weapon. Now, he had become the weapon of unimaginable power. The village was unaware of the reckoning that was heading its way. They were still too wrapped up in their petty squabbles, their endless politics. They thought they were safe, that their walls and defenses would protect them. But Naruto had long surpassed the limits they had set for themselves. He could feel the pulse of Konoha's life force from where he stood, distant and cold. His thoughts shifted to those who had wronged him, to those who had stood in his way. The elders, the Hokage, Danzo, their arrogance, their indifference toward him, they would pay for what they had done. For too long, he had lived in their shadow. For too long, he had fought for their approval. But no more. Naruto had come to a grim realization: the only way to free himself from his past, to prove his superiority, was to destroy the very thing that had bound him to it. Konoha was a symbol of his imprisonment, a constant reminder of everything he had suffered. To truly ascend, to rise beyond the realm of mortals, he needed to break those ties. Konoha would burn, and the world would know his power. With a simple flick of his wrist, he opened a dimensional rift beneath his feet. The air around him vibrated as his portals tore open reality itself, sending him crashing through space. In a flash, he appeared just outside Konoha's walls, his presence sending a shudder through the land. The guards were the first to notice, but by the time they reacted, they were already immobilized, suspended in midair by an overwhelming force of gravity. Naruto's eyes glowed with cold fury as he took a single step forward. The village that had once mocked him would now bear witness to his might. The first attack was swift and brutal. Naruto's portals tore through the village's defensive perimeter as though they were paper. His enemies had no time to respond. The instant they tried to form defensive formations, Naruto manipulated the gravitational fields around him, reducing their mobility to that of crawling insects. His mere presence was enough to shatter their will. As he walked through the streets, entire sections of the village buckled under the weight of his gravity manipulation. Buildings collapsed, their foundations no longer able to withstand the pressure. The ground cracked open as though the very earth was rebelling against his overwhelming force. He had no need for subtlety. He had no need for tactics. He was the weapon now, the god of the battlefield. The villagers ran in fear, but none could escape his wrath. The sounds of screams filled the air, mingling with the creaking of collapsing structures. At the Hokage's mansion, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the aging third Hokage, watched with horror as his village began to crumble under Naruto's assault. He had always known that the boy had the potential for great power, but this was beyond anything he had ever imagined. His hands trembled as he reached for the village's emergency seal, but he knew it was futile. Naruto was far beyond any jutsu or seal he could summon. The power that radiated from him was otherworldly, cosmic. Before he could react, Naruto was upon him. Hiruzen's heart sank as he saw the cold, ruthless expression on Naruto's face. "Naruto," he whispered, almost pleading. "What have you become?" Naruto's response was simple. He raised his hand, and with a flick of his wrist, Hiruzen's body was crushed under an intense field of gravity, his lungs crushed under the pressure. The once great Hokage fell to the ground, his breath stolen, his life extinguished in an instant. Danzo, the self-proclaimed protector of the village, was not far behind. He had already mobilized the root forces, hoping to combat the growing threat. But they were nothing more than ants before a raging storm. Danzo stood in the center of his underground lair, his right eye covered by a black patch, his fingers tightly gripping the handle of a kuno. His breathing was shallow as he prepared for the worst. He had fought in countless wars, dealt with countless enemies, but this was different. He had underestimated Naruto's power, just like everyone else. And now, he was going to pay the price for that mistake. The moment Danzo emerged from the shadows of his lair, he was greeted with the cold, unwavering gaze of Naruto. The younger man's presence was suffocating, oppressive, as if the very air itself bowed to him. "Danzo," Naruto said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You were always in the way. Always trying to control the village, control me. Your time has come." Danzo attempted to fight back, summoning his Sharingan and activating his defensive techniques, but Naruto's portals tore them apart. He reached out with a flick of his wrist, his energy crackling as reality itself bent to his will. With a single motion, he ripped through Danzo's defenses and crushed his heart. The life drained from Danzo's eyes as he crumpled to the ground, his body a puppet now controlled by Naruto's cosmic energy. With the deaths of the village's elder statesmen, the leadership of Konoha was in chaos. Yet, Naruto was not finished. He wasn't here just to destroy. He was here to make a statement. To prove that he was the true master of this world. And if anyone in Konoha was foolish enough to challenge him, they would learn the price of defiance. Naruto turned his gaze to the remaining members of Konoha's ninja force. Sasuke Uchiha, the last of the Uchiha clan, stood at the forefront of the survivors, his Sharingan blazing with fury. Kakashi Hatake, the ever-loyal former teacher, was nearby, his hands clenched into fists as he prepared for the inevitable fight. Sakura Haruno, who had once been a close friend, stood behind them, looking torn but determined. Naruto's voice boomed across the wreckage. "I am no longer the boy you once knew. I am no longer the weapon you tried to control. I have surpassed all of you." Sasuke, always driven by his need for revenge, stepped forward. "I'll never follow you," he spat. "Not after what you've done." Naruto's gaze hardened. "Then you will die. But I give you a choice, Sasuke. Join me. Stand by my side, and together we will crush those who oppose us. You will have power like no other. You will have the world at your feet." Kakashi stood with his sword at the ready. "Naruto," he whispered, his voice filled with both sorrow and defiance. "This isn't you." Naruto turned to face him. "Kakashi, you of all people should understand. You've always been bound by the past. By loyalty, by honor. But look at the world. Look at Konoha. What has it ever given you? What has it ever given me? He raised his hand, a rift in reality opening behind him. I offer you power. A new world where we rule. Sakura's voice trembled as she stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and desperation. Naruto, please. Don't do this. We were friends. We can stop this together. Naruto's eyes softened, just for a moment, but then his gaze hardened once more. You were never my friend. You were a tool, a distraction. You were never meant to understand. But you will if you choose to follow me. Naruto raised his hand again, and gravity intensified around the three of them, just enough to remind them of his power. I am not the Naruto you knew. You can join me, or you can perish. The choice is yours. With the fall of Konoha, Naruto's ambitions knew no bounds. The title of Hokage, the village protector, had long since lost its meaning. Now, he was the supreme force in the world, a god among men, capable of shaping reality itself with his will. The small, fractured villages that once dotted the land of the shinobi would no longer be allowed to exist in their pathetic, fractured states. They would bend to his power or be crushed beneath his heel. His portals had become the gateways through which he unleashed his wrath. One moment, Naruto would be in one corner of the world, and the next, he would appear on the borders of another village, his dimensional rifts effortlessly bypassing any defense the world could throw at him. The once proud shinobi villages, each steeped in their own rich history and guarded by powerful shinobi, were reduced to mere obstacles in his path to dominance. Tsunagakuer, the hidden sand, was the first to fall after Konoha. Its leaders had always been wary of Konoha's power, but they had never considered the possibility that one man could hold the potential to destroy them all. Gaara, the fifth Kazekage, had built his reputation on his control of the Shikaku, the one-tailed beast. But his mastery of the sands was nothing compared to the cosmic force Naruto wielded. Naruto arrived at the village gates, his aura enough to send tremors through the sand dunes surrounding the village. The citizens, unaware of his intentions, were initially confused, only for their confusion to turn to terror as he opened a portal in the sky and released an army of soldiers, each imbued with the same cosmic power he had mastered. It was a show of absolute force. The forces of Tsunagakuer, though fierce, were no match. Gaara, armed with the power of the Shikaku, tried to repel the invaders, using the desert itself to summon massive sandstorms and create colossal barriers. Yet, Naruto, with a mere wave of his hand, shattered the sand defense, bending gravity in such a way that Gaara's attacks were turned against him. No, Gaara whispered, his heart aching. He had no way to stop this. His sand, his pride, had no chance. With a single portal, Naruto ripped Gaara's defenses apart and crushed the spirit of the Kazekage, bringing him to the ground. The villagers watched as their leader was defeated, unable to do anything but witness the power of the man who had once been a child like them, ignored, abandoned, and scorned. Now, Naruto had become a nightmare to be feared. Naruto's message was clear: submit to me, or be destroyed. The fall of Kirigakure. Next came Kirigakure, the hidden mist village. Known for its bloodline technique, the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist, and the brutal reign of previous leaders, Kirigakure had a history as dark as any. The 4th Mizukage, Mei Terumi, had sought to bring peace to the village after years of civil unrest. But, like every other leader, she was not prepared for the storm that was coming. Naruto arrived on the shores of Kirigakure with the same cold, unwavering resolve. His dimensional portals opened above the village, raining down cosmic energy that obliterated the outer defenses in seconds. The villagers, caught off guard, had no time to flee as Naruto's army descended upon them, moving like shadows through the streets. The 7 ninja swordsmen tried to make a stand, each wielding their unique and deadly blades. But against Naruto, their skills were laughable. He opened a portal beneath the feet of one of the swordsmen, sending the man into a pocket dimension where time and space collapsed upon him. He didn't even have time to scream. Mei Terumi, the Mizukage, attempted to face Naruto in single combat, wielding her signature lava and boil release techniques. But Naruto simply blinked out of existence, reappearing behind her in a second, a rift in reality just large enough to send her crashing into the ground, her attacks futile. He did not even bother to kill her outright. Instead, he allowed her to live long enough to witness her village fall. Her last words to Naruto were filled with defiance: "You can destroy us all, but you will never rule us." Naruto smirked, the corners of his lips curling upward. "We'll see about that." With another flick of his wrist, gravity twisted around Mei, forcing her into submission. She felt every bone in her body creak under the pressure, and she collapsed, her will shattered. Her village, her people, were now under his control. Kirigakure, once a proud village of warriors, had been reduced to nothing more than another puppet under Naruto's thumb. The fall of the Raikage. The Raikage, had heard rumors of Naruto's destruction of Konoha, but he had always believed his own strength would be enough to defend his village. As the leader of the Hidden Cloud, a village known for its lightning-based techniques and strength, thought he could hold his own against any threat. But against Naruto, even the might of the Raikage was nothing more than an illusion of power. Naruto's arrival at the borders of Kumigakure was met with resistance, but the Raikage's forces were scattered and disorganized, struggling to mount any kind of meaningful defense. A and his brother, Killer B, rushed to the front lines to confront the threat personally. Together, they formed an unstoppable duo, A with his raw, unyielding power, and B with his tailed beast, the 8 tails. The fight was brief but devastating. Naruto didn't even give them the satisfaction of a long battle. He opened a portal beneath Killer B's feet, banishing him to a distant dimension where time moved differently, trapping him in an eternal void. The Raikage roared in fury, rushing at Naruto with everything he had. But Naruto simply held up his hand, creating a gravitational field so intense that he could barely move. The Raikage, for all his strength, was slow compared to the speed of light that Naruto now controlled. In an instant, Naruto faced behind him, thrusting his hand through A's chest, the Raikage's powerful body crumpling under the force of Naruto's cosmic energy. Killer B's return was no more successful. He tried to summon the 8 tails to fight back, but Naruto's portals and gravitational fields nullified the beast's power. He watched helplessly as his brother was brought to his knees, the weight of the cosmos itself bearing down on him. Naruto's victory was absolute. The Hidden Cloud fell in a matter of hours, its leaders broken and its people forced to accept their new god. Unstoppable power. With Konoha, Tsunagakure, Kirigakure, and Kumigakure brought to their knees, Naruto's power grew beyond imagination. His conquest of the remaining villages would be quick, he knew that now. The people of the shinobi world had seen what he was capable of, and though they resisted, they knew that resistance was futile. He had become a god of destruction, a tyrant whose reach extended to every corner of the world. His portals allowed him to strike anywhere, instantly, without warning. There was no place on earth that was safe from his gaze. Every country, every village, every nation bowed before him. Those who did not were wiped out. Naruto's rule was absolute, and in his wake, he left only fear and chaos. But there was a part of him, a small, forgotten fragment of the boy who had once dreamed of recognition, who wondered what would come next. Was this what he truly wanted? A world where he reigned, but where everyone feared him. Still, as the leader of his army, the sole master of the world, Naruto knew there was no going back. He had won, and now it was time to reshape the world in his image. The age of Naruto, the cosmic god, had begun. As Naruto's empire of destruction expanded, an undercurrent of resistance began to form. The villagers who had been crushed under the weight of his cosmic might began to rally together. The last glimmers of hope flickered in the hearts of those who had survived his wrath, those who had been too weak to stand against him in the past but who could not abide by the reign of a tyrant who ruled through fear. The resistance was born from the ashes of the fallen villages, a coalition of the broken and the betrayed. Among them were figures like Sasuke Uchiha, Gaara of the Sand, and Tsunade Senju, each with their own vendetta against Naruto, each with their own reasons for fighting back. Sasuke had always been driven by revenge, but the death of his brother, the fall of his village, and the reality of what Naruto had become gave him new purpose. The Uchiha clan had been reduced to dust, and now, Sasuke stood as the last of his line, determined to either reclaim the world or burn it all down. Gaara, the once reclusive Kase Kage, had witnessed Naruto's terrifying power firsthand. The fall of his village had left him hollowed out, but it also sparked a deep-seated rage that pushed him to take action. He could no longer stand by as Naruto obliterated the very foundations of the world. Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, had watched helplessly as Naruto destroyed Konoha. She had been part of the last bastion of hope for the village, and now she was its sole survivor. Her guilt and grief were overwhelming, but so was her resolve to stop Naruto no matter the cost. The world had to be rebuilt. The resistance didn't just consist of these broken leaders. They were joined by a few surviving shinobi, Kakashi, Sakura, and others who refused to let the world be completely dominated by Naruto's tyrannical rule. The remnants of Konoha's forces, though decimated, formed a small but fierce army. Their goal was not just survival, but the possibility of reclaiming the world. What no one expected, however, was the intervention of the Otsutsuki, the ancient clan of gods and conquerors who had long manipulated the shinobi world from the shadows. They saw Naruto's power as a direct challenge to their dominance. His ability to manipulate the very fabric of space and time had piqued their interest, and they recognized that a being of his caliber could potentially bring an end to their centuries-long plans. The Otsutsuki were no strangers to power. They had already seeded the earth with their influence, manipulating the bloodlines and techniques of the shinobi for eons. But Naruto, with his mastery over cosmic energy, posed an existential threat to their long-term goals. His control over portals and reality could destabilize the entire system they had built, and they would not allow that to happen without a fight. A tenuous alliance was formed between the resistance and the Otsutsuki remnants, those who had broken away from the main clan and sought to restore their own power. The Otsutsuki viewed Naruto's rise as a threat to their control, and they decided that they would work with the rebellion to bring him down. The initial skirmishes between Naruto's forces and the newly formed resistance were brief but intense. The Otsutsuki remnants, though weakened by centuries of hiding in the shadows, were still formidable opponents. Their power was different from Naruto's, rooted in their manipulation of chakra, space, and dimensions, but their strength was a match for the rebellion's will to fight. Tsunade, Gaara, Sasuke, and the remaining shinobi leaders set their sights on the heart of Naruto's empire. They knew that to defeat him, they would need to target his core, the source of his power. But that task was easier said than done. Naruto's cosmic energy had altered the world itself. His portals connected places that should have been unreachable, and his gravity manipulation warped the battlefield, making it nearly impossible to land a direct blow against him. The first real confrontation came at the borders of what was once the Land of Fire. Tsunade and the Otsutsuki remnants joined forces, hoping to infiltrate one of Naruto's dimensional portals and strike at the heart of his power. Sasuke and Gaara would provide support from the ground, each preparing for their own confrontation with the cosmic god who had once been a comrade. The rebellion's plan was to use stealth, enter one of Naruto's portals and find a way to disrupt his connection to the cosmic energy he had harnessed. It was a risky move, but it was their best chance. They could not confront Naruto directly without the help of the Otsutsuki, who had the knowledge of dimensional manipulation necessary to navigate Naruto's twisted realities. However, Naruto's awareness of his surroundings was all-encompassing. He had mastered the ability to sense the slightest disturbances in his domain. As the rebellion made its way to one of his portals, Naruto's eyes narrowed, and he immediately opened a rift beneath them. The ground beneath them cracked, and the entire landscape shifted as Naruto tore the very fabric of reality itself. "What do you think you're doing?" Naruto's voice boomed, filled with both curiosity and disdain. The Otsutsuki remnants reacted quickly, but they were no match for the sheer intensity of his power. Naruto opened a rift above them, releasing a massive gravitational force that crushed several of the rebels into the ground. Sasuke and Gaara quickly launched their attacks, but they were barely able to get close. Sasuke's Chidori was deflected by Naruto's gravity manipulation, and Gaara's sand was instantly crushed under Naruto's crushing gravitational fields. Despite their strength, they could not overcome the cosmic power that flowed through Naruto's veins. In a split second, Naruto shifted the battlefield once again, opening a massive portal above them. Energy cascaded through the rift, pulling them toward it like moths to a flame. The Otsutsuki remnants, sensing the danger, tried to escape, but the gravitational pull was too strong. "You have no idea what you're up against," Naruto said, his voice cold and filled with contempt. "You never did." He was no longer the boy who had dreamed of becoming Hokage. The boy who had wanted recognition and respect. That Naruto was dead, and in his place stood a being beyond comprehension, a force of nature that would reshape the world in his image. Sasuke and Tsunade struggled to hold their ground, but Naruto's grip on the battlefield tightened with every passing moment. The resistance had no answers to his overwhelming power. It was in this moment of tension that the Otsutsuki remnants made their move. Realizing they were in danger of being consumed by Naruto's power, they turned on the rebellion. It had always been a fragile alliance, one born out of necessity rather than trust, and now they revealed their true intentions. The Otsutsuki remnants, knowing they could not defeat Naruto directly, planned to use the rebellion as pawns. Their goal had always been the same: to harness Naruto's power for themselves and rid the world of any remaining threats to their dominion. As the battle raged on, the Otsutsuki launched a surprise attack on Sasuke, Gaara, and Tsunade. Their chakra-based techniques cut through the resistance like a knife through butter. The betrayal was swift, and many of the rebels were cut down before they could react. Naruto, however, was far from surprised. He had known the Otsutsuki would betray him the moment they realized he had surpassed them. With a cold smile, he simply opened another portal, this time trapping the Otsutsuki remnants in a dimension where they could not escape. "I gave you a chance," Naruto said, his voice filled with bitterness. "But you couldn't see beyond your own pride. Now, you'll suffer the consequences." With the Otsutsuki dealt with, Naruto turned his attention back to the remaining rebels. Sasuke, Gaara, and Tsunade lay battered but not broken. They had failed yet again to stop Naruto's inevitable rise. But the fight wasn't over. They had one last chance to unite against him, to defy the cosmic god he had become. For now, the resistance was scattered and broken, but the spark of rebellion still burned. The question was no longer if they could defeat Naruto but if they could survive long enough to try. Naruto sat on the throne of his empire, carved from the ruins of Konoha, a stark monument to his triumph. Once, he had dreamed of being the village's Hokage, a leader beloved by the people. Now, he was a ruler feared across the elemental nations, commanding absolute obedience. Yet, the exhilaration of conquest had faded, replaced by an emptiness he couldn't name. The cosmic energy that had once felt like liberation now seemed like a shackle. Naruto's ability to manipulate dimensions and control gravity was unmatched, but every use of his powers came at a cost. The stability of the world itself was fracturing. Dimensional rifts began appearing in random places, pulling innocents into voids they could not escape. Natural disasters, tsunamis, earthquakes, and storms ravaged the lands, displacing millions. Naruto dismissed these events at first, seeing them as minor side effects of his rise to power. But as the disasters grew more frequent, the cries of his people reached his ears. Rather than inspire guilt, they made him resentful. He had given these people peace, had saved them from the chaos of their petty wars, and still, they dared to complain. Ungrateful fools, Naruto muttered to himself, his voice carrying through the empty halls of his throne room. The silence around him was oppressive, a stark contrast to the cacophony of his younger years. Once, he had been surrounded by friends, teammates, and a village that, while reluctant, had slowly started to accept him. Now, he was alone. Absolute power had come at the cost of everything he once held dear. Naruto's paranoia began to grow. He saw enemies in every shadow, even among his closest followers. His army, once a symbol of his might, became a source of anxiety. He feared betrayal, believing that someone, perhaps Sasuke or one of the surviving rebels, might rise to challenge him. To prevent this, Naruto tightened his grip on the elemental nations. He enacted harsher laws, demanded stricter loyalty from his generals, and executed anyone who showed even a hint of dissent. Villages that had once welcomed him as a liberator now trembled under his rule, their people living in constant fear. The more isolated Naruto became, the more erratic his behavior grew. His once calculated use of cosmic energy turned reckless. He began opening portals at random, using them to spy on the resistance, punish perceived threats, or simply display his dominance. Each portal, however, further destabilized the fabric of reality, widening the dimensional rifts that plagued the world. Naruto's physical appearance began to change as well. The cosmic energy coursing through him seemed to consume him from the inside out. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, his skin took on a faint, otherworldly sheen, and his once bright hair darkened to an almost celestial black. The villagers whispered that he was no longer human, that he had become something akin to a god or a demon. Despite the chaos around him, Naruto clung to his vision of peace. In his mind, the destruction was necessary, a temporary sacrifice for the greater good. He believed that once he had complete control of the world, he could stabilize the chaos and bring about the utopia he had promised. But the world did not see him as a savior. They saw only a tyrant whose power had spiraled out of control. The resistance, though battered and scattered, began to rally once more. Sasuke, Tsunade, and Gaara, still reeling from their earlier defeat, found allies among the displaced villagers and those who had suffered under Naruto's rule. Among these allies was an unexpected figure, Orochimaru. The rogue shinobi, intrigued by the cosmic energy destabilizing the world, offered his knowledge and resources to the resistance. Though they distrusted him, the rebels had no choice but to accept his help. Orochimaru's research revealed a horrifying truth: Naruto's powers were not limitless. The more he used the cosmic energy, the more unstable he became, and the closer the world came to total collapse. His power is like a cancer, Orochimaru explained, his voice dripping with fascination. It consumes him as it consumes the world. If we can push him to his limits, he will destroy himself. The dimensional rifts reached a critical point. Entire villages disappeared overnight, swallowed by the void. The oceans began to boil, the skies cracked with unearthly light, and time itself seemed to warp in places. Days passed in seconds for some, while others were trapped in eternal twilight. Naruto, desperate to maintain control, used his powers more frequently, believing he could repair the damage. But every attempt only made things worse. His once flawless portals became unstable, spilling raw cosmic energy into the world and accelerating its destruction. The rebellion seized this opportunity. Armed with Orochimaru's research and the remnants of the Itsutsuki's knowledge, they devised a plan to exploit Naruto's instability. Their goal was not just to defeat him, but to sever his connection to the cosmic energy entirely. The final battle took place at the ruins of Konoha, where Naruto's reign had begun. The resistance launched a coordinated assault, using every resource at their disposal to weaken him. Sasuke, wielding the full power of his Sharingan and Rinnegan, confronted Naruto directly, their clash shaking the earth. Gaara and Tsunade led the ground forces, their combined strength holding off Naruto's army. Orochimaru, working in the shadows, activated a device designed to disrupt Naruto's connection to the cosmic energy. Naruto fought with a ferocity born of desperation. His portals tore through the battlefield, swallowing entire squads of rebels, and his gravity fields crushed any who dared approach. But his movements were slower, his attacks less precise. The instability of his power was beginning to show. "You think you can stop me?" Naruto roared, his voice echoing with cosmic energy. "I am the ruler of this world. I am its savior. You're nothing but a monster." Sasuke retorted, his Sharingan blazing as he charged forward. Their clash sent shockwaves across the battlefield, the remnants of their friendship buried beneath years of bitterness and betrayal. As the battle raged on, Orochimaru's device activated. A surge of energy erupted from the ruins, disrupting Naruto's connection to the cosmic power. For the first time in years, Naruto felt a weakness he had forgotten existed. His control over his powers faltered, and the dimensional rifts began to collapse inward. "No. This can't be happening," Naruto shouted, struggling to stabilize the energy within him. But it was too late. The rebellion's plan had worked. Sasuke delivered the final blow, his Chidori piercing through Naruto's chest. The cosmic energy erupted from Naruto's body, tearing through the sky in a blinding flash. The dimensional rifts began to close, the natural disasters subsided, and the world seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. As Naruto fell to the ground, his glowing eyes dimmed. For a moment, he looked like the boy he had once been, lonely, desperate, and searching for acceptance. I only wanted peace," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sasuke knelt beside him, his expression unreadable. "You had it," he said softly. "But you destroyed it?" With those words, Naruto took his final breath. The cosmic energy that had consumed him dissipated, leaving behind a broken boy who had once dreamed of being a hero. The world began to rebuild in the aftermath of Naruto's reign. The villages, though scarred, found new hope in unity. The resistance leaders became symbols of resilience, their efforts ensuring that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. Naruto's name became both a cautionary tale and a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. In the ruins of Konoha, a small memorial was erected in his honor, not as a hero, but as a boy who had been consumed by his dreams. The cosmic energy, now dormant, remained a mystery. Though it had brought destruction, it also left behind a lingering question: what other forces lay hidden in the universe, waiting to be discovered? The shinobi world moved forward, but the scars of Naruto's reign would never fully heal. His legacy, though tragic, would forever shape the course of history. The world was falling apart, torn asunder by the unchecked power of the cosmic energy flowing through Naruto. Dimensional rifts yawned across the land, swallowing entire landscapes into oblivion. Time distorted, twisting days into minutes and freezing moments into eternity. Amidst the chaos, the remnants of the resistance gathered for their final assault. Sasuke stood at the forefront, his Rinnegan glowing with determination. Beside him were Gaara, Tsunade, Orochimaru, and a collection of battle-worn shinobi from every major village. They had no choice but to unite, the survival of the world depended on it. "We've lost too much to back down now," Gaara said, his sand swirling protectively around him. "Naruto must be stopped." Sasuke clenched his fist, the weight of their mission heavy on his shoulders. "This isn't the Naruto we knew. Whatever he's become, he's beyond reason. We strike now, or there won't be a world left to save." Tsunade nodded grimly, her once fiery spirit now tempered by years of loss. "Orochimaru, is your device ready?" The snake-like shinobi smirked, holding up a small, glowing sphere filled with pulsing energy. "It's not perfect, but it will sever his connection to the cosmic power if we can get close enough." The Resistance's plan was audacious, even suicidal. Orochimaru's device needed to be activated within close proximity to Naruto to disrupt the flow of cosmic energy. But reaching him was no simple task. His dimensional portals allowed him to strike from anywhere, and his gravity fields could annihilate entire armies. Naruto's wrath. Atop the ruins of the Hidden Leaf Village, Naruto stood alone, his cosmic aura pulsating like a second sun. His once human form had transformed into something otherworldly. His skin shimmered with starlight, his eyes glowed with infinite power, and his every movement warped the air around him. He was no longer just a man, he was a force of nature. When the resistance approached, Naruto opened a portal and stepped through it, appearing before them in an instant. His presence was overwhelming, his voice carrying the weight of a god. "You dare challenge me?" Naruto boomed, his voice echoing through the shattered landscape. "After all I've done for this world, you betray me." Sasuke stepped forward, his Sharingan blazing. "You've destroyed more than you've saved, Naruto. You're not a god, you're a tyrant. This ends now." Naruto's expression darkened, a flicker of sadness crossing his face before being consumed by fury. "You always envied me, Sasuke. You hated that I surpassed you. Now you side with those who would have let me rot in the shadows. You're a fool." With a wave of his hand, Naruto summoned a massive gravity well, pulling the resistance toward him with crushing force. Gaara's sand and Tsunade's brute strength held the group together, but the sheer pressure threatened to tear them apart. The battlefield shifted as Naruto opened portals, dragging the resistance into other dimensions. They fought in a realm of endless voids, where the only light came from Naruto's cosmic aura. Gravity shifted unpredictably, forcing the shinobi to adapt their strategies on the fly. Sasuke countered Naruto's portals with his Rinnegan, teleporting his allies out of danger and launching devastating attacks. Gaara used his sand to anchor the group, creating barriers against Naruto's energy blasts. Tsunade fought with raw power, her chakra-enhanced strikes shaking the ground even in these alien dimensions. But Naruto was relentless. He manipulated the environment, turning the battlefield into a weapon. Portals appeared beneath the resistance, threatening to drop them into infinite abysses. Energy beams tore through the air, forcing them to scatter. "You can't win," Naruto said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "I see everything, control everything. Your rebellion is meaningless." Orochimaru, lurking in the shadows, activated the first stage of his device. A surge of energy rippled through the dimension, disrupting Naruto's portals for a moment. It was a small victory, but it gave the resistance a chance to regroup. Sacrifices. Naruto's power was overwhelming, and the resistance paid a heavy price. Many shinobi fell in the battle, their sacrifices buying precious time for Orochimaru to complete his device. Even Gaara's sand began to falter under the strain, and Tsunade was forced to use her healing abilities to keep the group alive. In a desperate move, Sasuke confronted Naruto directly. Their clash shook the fabric of the dimension, sending shockwaves that rippled through the void. Sasuke's Chidori met Naruto's energy blade, the collision creating an explosion of light and power. "Why, Naruto?" Sasuke shouted, his voice filled with both anger and sorrow. "You had everything you wanted: strength, recognition. Why did you throw it all away?" Naruto's expression hardened. "Because the world didn't deserve it. They feared me, hated me. I gave them peace, and they rejected it. If they won't accept salvation willingly, I'll force it upon them." Sasuke gritted his teeth, pushing against Naruto's overwhelming strength. "You've become the very thing you swore to destroy." As the battle reached its climax, Orochimaru's device was ready. The resistance launched a coordinated assault, drawing Naruto's attention while Orochimaru approached from behind. Sasuke unleashed his most powerful techniques, including the Injura's arrow, while Gaara and Tsunade provided support. Naruto, distracted by the relentless assault, didn't notice Orochimaru until it was too late. The device activated, releasing a surge of energy that engulfed Naruto. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent as the cosmic power within him began to unravel. Naruto screamed, his voice echoing with pain and rage. The light around him flickered, and his form began to revert. The cosmic energy that had once made him invincible now threatened to destroy him. You think this will stop me? Naruto roared, his voice filled with defiance. I am more than this power. I am destiny itself. But even as he spoke, his strength faded. The dimensional rifts began to close, and the natural disasters subsided. The world, though scarred, began to stabilize. Naruto's defeat. Sasuke approached Naruto, his sword drawn. The boy he had once called a friend was barely recognizable, his body broken and his power drained. It's over, Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice heavy with emotion. This madness ends here. Naruto looked up at him, his glowing eyes dimming. For a moment, the fury in his expression softened, replaced by a flicker of regret. I just wanted to be accepted. Sasuke hesitated, the weight of their shared history pressing down on him. But he knew what had to be done. With a swift strike, he ended Naruto's life, the cosmic energy dissipating into the air like stardust. The resistance mourned their losses, but they knew their fight had saved the world. Sasuke, Gaara, and Tsunade vowed to rebuild, creating a new era of unity among the villages. Naruto's name became both a cautionary tale and a symbol of the dangers of unchecked power. In the ruins of Konoha, a simple memorial was erected, a reminder of the boy who had once dreamed of becoming a hero, only to be consumed by his own strength. Though the world moved on, the scars of Naruto's reign would never fully heal. His legacy, both tragic and profound, would shape the shinobi world for generations to come. As the world teetered on the brink of collapse, Sasuke stepped forward, his Sharingan and Rinnegan blazing. The remnants of the resistance watched with bated breath. They had seen the destruction Naruto had wrought, but Sasuke, perhaps the last person who still believed in him, had one final gambit to try. Naruto floated above the shattered remnants of the battlefield, his cosmic aura pulsating like a dying star. His once human-like form was almost completely consumed by celestial energy, his features unrecognizable. He was no longer Naruto Uzumaki, he was a force of destruction. Sasuke, Naruto said, his voice hollow, reverberating with otherworldly resonance. You're wasting your time. There's nothing left to save. Sasuke gritted his teeth, stepping closer despite the suffocating energy radiating from Naruto. That's where you're wrong, Naruto. You're still in there. Somewhere beneath all this power, beneath the hatred and pain, you're still the boy who swore to protect his friends. Naruto's eyes flickered, a faint trace of emotion passing through them before it was swallowed by rage. You don't understand, Sasuke. I gave everything to this world, and they spat in my face. They deserve what's happening to them. You think this is what we deserved? Sasuke shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. What about the ones who believed in you? What about Iruka, Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata? What about me? Naruto hesitated for a fraction of a second, the name striking a chord buried deep within his fragmented soul. Sasuke seized the opportunity, stepping closer. We were supposed to change this world together, Sasuke said, his voice softer now. You were my rival, my friend. The person I trusted to understand my pain. Don't let that be meaningless. Naruto's cosmic aura wavered. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Sasuke's words might reach him. But then, the energy around Naruto flared violently. Enough. Naruto roared, his voice shaking the very fabric of the dimension. I don't need your pity, Sasuke. I don't need anyone. Naruto raised his hand, summoning a massive portal to crush Sasuke. Sasuke braced himself, activating his Rinnegan to counter. At the last moment, Naruto hesitated, his hand trembling. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough. The resistance had been watching carefully. Orochimaru, still hidden among the chaos, activated the second phase of his device. It sent a concentrated pulse of energy into Naruto, disrupting his connection to the cosmic force. Naruto screamed in agony, his energy fluctuating wildly. The brief hesitation allowed Gaara and the remaining shinobi to strike, trapping Naruto within a massive barrier of sand and sealing jutsu. It's now or never. Orochimaru shouted. We need to sever his connection before the entire dimension collapses. Sasuke, battered but determined, stepped forward. He activated his Rinnegan's most powerful ability, channeling all his remaining chakra into a dimensional tether. The goal was to sever Naruto from the cosmic energy entirely, but it was a gamble Sasuke knew it might cost him his life. Hang on, Naruto, Sasuke whispered, his voice filled with both resolve and sorrow. I won't let you destroy yourself. As the battle raged, the elemental nations were falling apart. The overuse of Naruto's cosmic energy had destabilized reality itself. Dimensional rifts tore through the land, swallowing entire villages into oblivion. The sky fractured like glass, revealing an endless void beyond. The resistance fought desperately to hold the world together. Tsunade and Gaara worked with other surviving shinobi to stabilize the land using their chakra, but it was a losing battle. The longer Naruto remained connected to his power, the more the world unraveled. Time's running out. Tsunade shouted, her voice filled with desperation. If we don't stop him now, there won't be anything left to save. Sasuke's dimensional tether finally connected, latching onto the core of Naruto's power. The feedback was immense, sending shock waves through both of them. Naruto screamed as the cosmic energy began to peel away from him, piece by piece. No. Naruto roared, his voice filled with both fury and anguish. You don't understand. Without this power, I'm nothing. You were always something, Naruto. Sasuke shouted back. This power doesn't define you. It's destroying you. The dimensional rifts began to close, but the process was excruciatingly slow. The resistance poured all their chakra into holding the world together, but it was clear they couldn't sustain it much longer. Naruto, now weakened and vulnerable, looked at Sasuke with a mixture of hatred and despair. Why? Why are you doing this? After everything I've done, why do you still care? Sasuke's expression softened, his Rinnegan glowing faintly. Because you were my friend, Naruto. And because you deserve better than this. For the first time in years, Naruto's hardened expression cracked. A single tear slid down his face, quickly evaporating in the heat of his fading aura. I just wanted to make them see me. They saw you, Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice steady. You just couldn't see yourself. With a final surge of energy, Sasuke severed Naruto's connection to the cosmic force. The resulting explosion sent shockwaves through the battlefield, extinguishing the rifts and stabilizing the elemental nations. Naruto collapsed to the ground, his body broken but alive. The resistance approached cautiously, unsure of what to expect. Sasuke knelt beside him, his Rinnegan flickering as he reached his limit. The world, though scarred, began to heal. The dimensional rifts closed, and the natural disasters subsided. The survivors of the battle gathered, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow. Naruto, now stripped of his cosmic power, looked up at Sasuke. What happens now? Sasuke sighed, his expression weary. That's up to you. But this time, you won't face it alone. Though Naruto's reign of terror had ended, the scars he left on the world would take generations to heal. The shinobi world vowed to rebuild, not just their villages but the bonds that had been broken. Naruto, once feared and hated, was given a second chance not as a god, but as a man. Naruto's aura flared with the last remnants of his cosmic energy. The battlefield was silent, save for the hum of power emanating from him. He stood amidst the ruins of a once thriving world, his body glowing faintly as cracks began to appear in his cosmic form. Though weakened, his pride burned brighter than ever. I can fix this, Naruto said, his voice tinged with desperation. He looked around at the destruction he had wrought, the shattered lands, the dimensional tears that threatened to consume the entire planet. I can make it right. I just need more time. You've had enough time, Sasuke said, stepping forward, his body battered but still standing. His Rinnegan glowed faintly, its power barely sustained after the massive effort to sever Naruto's connection to the cosmic energy. Behind him stood the resistance, a broken but determined group of shinobi united by one goal, ending Naruto's reign. Naruto's eyes burned with defiance. You don't understand. I did this for all of you. I gave everything to make this world better, and this is how you repay me. You didn't make it better, Naruto, Sasuke said, his tone sharp but filled with sorrow. You destroyed it? And now, you can't even admit it. You're clinging to power because you're afraid to let go. Naruto clenched his fists, his aura flaring again. The cracks in his body deepened, spilling cosmic light. I won't let you take this from me. I worked too hard, suffered too much. You became the very thing you swore to fight against, Sasuke interrupted, his voice cutting through Naruto's rant. A tyrant. Naruto's expression twisted into a snarl. You betrayed me, Sasuke. You all betrayed me. Sasuke's gaze softened. No, Naruto. We tried to save you. The forbidden sealing jutsu. The remaining resistance gathered behind Sasuke, forming a circle. Orochimaru stepped forward, his pale face reflecting grim satisfaction. He held an ancient scroll covered in blood-red seals, the culmination of years of forbidden knowledge. This is the only way to stop him, Orochimaru said, his voice low but resolute. It will cost us greatly, but the alternative is annihilation. Sasuke nodded. Do it? Tsunade, her body weary from the battle, stepped into the circle, placing her hands over the scroll. This jutsu is meant for something far greater than any one man. Are we sure this will work? It has to, Gaara said, his voice calm but firm. There's no other choice. The group began to weave the seals, their chakra intertwining to form a massive binding circle around Naruto. The ground beneath him glowed, ancient symbols etching themselves into the earth. Naruto staggered as he felt the pull of the jutsu, his cosmic energy rebelling against the force trying to contain him. No. Naruto roared, summoning a massive portal above him. I won't be caged like an animal. The portal began to expand, its gravitational pull threatening to suck in the shinobi around him. Sasuke stepped forward, activating his Rinnegan one last time. He formed a dimensional tether, anchoring the portal to the sealing circle. You're not escaping this time, Naruto, Sasuke said, his voice steady despite the strain. Naruto lashed out, sending blasts of cosmic energy toward the resistance. Gaara countered with a massive wave of sand, while Tsunade used her strength to protect the others. Despite their efforts, the power Naruto unleashed was overwhelming. I won't go quietly. Naruto screamed, his voice echoing across dimensions. You'll all regret this. The sealing circle began to activate, glowing brighter as the jutsu reached its peak. Naruto thrashed against the pull, his cosmic energy clashing with the ancient seals. For a moment, it seemed as though his power might overwhelm the jutsu. Sasuke stepped into the center of the circle, his chakra flaring. Naruto, this ends now. Naruto's eyes met Sasuke's, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Sasuke. Don't do this. I don't want to, Sasuke admitted, his voice filled with pain. But you've left me no choice. With a final surge of energy, Sasuke channeled all his remaining power into the sealing jutsu. The circle erupted in light, consuming Naruto in a vortex of energy. Naruto screamed, his voice filled with rage and betrayal. You'll regret this, Sasuke. All of you will. His words echoed as his form was pulled into the void. For a brief moment, his eyes softened, and a single tear fell. I just wanted to be free. The vortex closed, leaving nothing but silence. The sealing jutsu had worked, trapping Naruto in a dimensionless void where his power could no longer harm the world. The battlefield was eerily quiet. The resistance stood together, their bodies battered and their chakra nearly depleted. The dimensional rifts had begun to heal, the world slowly stitching itself back together now that Naruto's influence was gone. Sasuke collapsed to his knees, his Rinnegan fading. "It's over," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Tsunade placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression somber. "At what cost?" The survivors looked around at the devastation. Villages lay in ruins, countless lives had been lost, and the scars of the battle would linger for generations. Yet, there was a glimmer of hope. With Naruto gone, the shinobi world had a chance to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, the remaining nations convened to discuss the future. The era of villages ruled by fear and power was over. Sasuke, now seen as a hero, refused any position of leadership, choosing instead to wonder and reflect on the choices that had led them here. Tsunade and Gaara worked tirelessly to rebuild their villages, fostering alliances to ensure that such devastation could never happen again. Naruto, sealed in the void, floated in endless darkness. Though his power was gone, his mind remained. He replayed the events over and over, questioning where it had all gone wrong. In his solitude, he began to realize the depth of his mistakes. Years passed. The world slowly healed, scars fading but never forgotten. Stories of Naruto Uzumaki, the cosmic tyrant who had brought the world to its knees, became legends, warnings of the dangers of unchecked power. Deep within the void, Naruto's presence remained. Though sealed, he could feel the faintest connection to the world he had left behind. It was a bittersweet comfort, a reminder that even in darkness, a part of him still existed. And perhaps, one day, he might find redemption.